O Lord, my strength, my salvation. Amen. Would you please be seated?
Amen.
I don't know about you, but there's some things I would rather not know. They usually deal with, George, I want to tell you what the girls are up to. Susan. Some things in life I just don't want to hear about. I want to live in a little bubble. Well, I had an opportunity this week. On Wednesday, I had to get a nuclear medicine test up in Ocala, where they do all these things with these expensive machines that go burp and bump. And on Monday, I got the call to remind me of the appointment. And I was thinking about this on Monday on my way home from work, and I was thinking, you know, no one will know if I don't go. I could go to catch a movie in Ocala, get a nice lunch, and tell Susan that I went to the place. The doctor's so busy, if he doesn't get the test results, it won't occur to him to follow up. And these people, you know, Blue Cross will pay him off to be quiet. Because I don't particularly want to know what they're going to find. Because if I know what it is, then I'll worry about it. Well, I went through this crisis for about maybe 5 minutes before I said, no, I better go and find out what the test is all about. Because I would rather know the bad news instead of being ignorant and happy. And to tell you the truth, I would rather know the bad news about what my kids are up to than to be ignorant and happy. And that's why I'm going to preach to you about hell today. That's what Jesus talks about. Now, raise your hands if you've ever heard a sermon about hell in the Episcopal Church outside of this building. Everybody's hands are popping up in the air. Hell's not something we talk about. Because it's something we really would rather not know about. Yes, it's there. Yes, Jesus more than anybody else goes on and on about hell in the Bible. There's nobody who talks up hell more than Jesus. Jesus, gentle, meek, and mild, he's always banging on about hell. So every once in a while, we really need to settle down and talk about what is hell. Who is going to hell? What is hell? Now, most of us, and I include myself in this, have images of hell that have nothing to do with the Bible. They have, if we're all educated, we're all devotees of Dante's Inferno, or John Milton in Paradise, Pilgrim's Progress. Or if we're foreigners, we may have read Dr. Faustus by Goethe, or we watch Stephen King movies and things like that. We have this vision of hell that could be ridiculous. I remember a movie of Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford as devils, dressed in little red costumes with pitchforks. Well, you know, that hell may have been cool, man, in 1964. But what does the Bible say about hell? No, it is not a place where people dressed up in devil costumes and poke your behind with a three-pronged spear. Well, let's start at the beginning. Our gospel reading today, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he is warning them of the dangers of hell. If your hand offend thee, causes you to stumble, cut it off. It's better to go to heaven with only one hand than to go to hell. And he specifically says, to go to hell, to the unquenchable fire. Then, if a foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. For you to enter life lame, for it's better for you to enter life lame than to have 2 feet and to be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out, pluck it out. For it's better for you to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than to have 2 eyes and to be thrown into hell, where the worm never dies and the fire is never quenched. From this we get this image that hell is a place where Satan, the worm, the devil is there, and the fires are burning always, and you are suffering justly because of your sin and your brokenness. And from this point, people like Dante and Milton and novelists take this really far past what the Bible says about hell. So that's what I want to talk to you about. What does the Bible say about hell? What does our tradition tell us about hell? Who is going to go to hell? Well, what is this word hell? Where did it come from? Well, it's a good old-fashioned English word. Hela. In the Nordic mythology of northern Germany and England, Hela was the goddess of death. So fellas, never date a woman named Hela. And Hela lived in, where did Hela live? Hell. So when they came to translate the Bible into English, what we call the King James Bible, they needed to come up to a word for two Greek words, Hades and Gehenna. These two words appear in the New Testament to describe hell, and they took these two different places and gave it one good old-fashioned English word called hell. As an aside, I preached this sermon last night, and Bella attended, and I'm told that all the way back in the car, she kept going, hell, 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 damn, 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 and she couldn't be disciplined because she was talking about the sermon. I exaggerated a tiny bit. But in this reading today, we've got Jesus saying, you be cast into hell, the unquenchable fire. And the word he says, it's Gehenna. We have other words Jesus uses. 8 times he uses Hades in the Greek, and 7 times Gehenna. Both are translated into hell as English. Now, what's Hades? Well, Hades comes from the Greek god Hades. It's the underworld, the kingdom of the dead. And in the common mythology of the Mediterranean world, Hades was the nether region, the unseen world, the place where you go, a place of darkness and shadows. You didn't really know more about that, but that was the abode of the dead. And Jesus talks about Hades many times. For example, he gives the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. Lazarus is a beggar sitting in front of the house of a rich man, and he begs for food, and the rich man just waves him away, and Lazarus is so poor that the dogs lick his sores, and he eventually dies. But Lazarus goes to the bosom of Abraham, to paradise. The rich man dies suddenly, and he goes to Hades. In Hades, across the great divide, he sees Lazarus in paradise, the bosom of Abraham. And he says to Abraham, 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 let me pass into the promised world. And the response is, you had your chance in life. You chose where you wound up. Well, at least send someone back. Send me back as a ghost, as something to warn my brothers, so that they may not suffer my fate in hell, in Hades. And Abraham says to him, if they don't listen to the law of the prophets, they're not going to listen. That's the Hades that Jesus uses there. He says that Capernaum one day will be subsumed into Hades. And then he has what we have today. If your eye offend thee, pluck it out. It's better to be blind than to go to Gehenna. Gehenna, what is Henna? On the west side of Jerusalem at this time of Jesus' life was the valley of Henna. Gehenna means valley of Henna. And Gehenna was where, before Jerusalem was a Jewish city, it was where the Canaanites had their temples and idol worship. And when the Jews took it over, they turned that into the municipal garbage dump. And in this garbage dump was all the refuse from the town, and Gehenna was a place of flies, of stink, of dirt. And like a lot of garbage dumps, it was perpetually on fire. This Gehenna was a byword for basically the most awful place on the earth. Man, it was Okeechobee. But it was a place that these people could identify and knew exactly what he was talking about. If your eye offends you, pluck it out. It's better to be blind than to wind up in Okeechobee. I served in Okeechobee for 3 years, so I can talk about it. So Jesus is using two words, Hades and Gehenna. decided to make it simple and have one word: hell. And part of our problem in understanding what hell is like is that we've got two different things going on here, and then we have something completely. An addition is what happens when Christ comes again and we are judged. Well, those who are saved go to heaven with God, and those who are damned go to hell. Now we're using hell for a third place, because that's not Gehenna, and it's not Hades. That's the lake of fire. Eternity of pain and separation and death. That's a third place of the earth. So let me basically try to untangle all these things and teach you the doctrine of hell. Now, the early church thought greatly about this because the Bible is not clear and explicit on what happens. There's a lot of symbolic language. How do we know it's symbolic? Well, we're told that hell is where the Satan and his devils will be sent by God at the end of time as punishment for their rebellion. What do we know about devils and fallen angels? Do they have physical fleshy bodies? No, they don't. So what's a little fire and smoke and flies to them? That's where they're going to go to be punished. So this imagery of fire is exactly that. It's to symbolize something that's much worse. So the early church tried to figure out, how does this work? Using Bible, using logic. And over the course of time, it developed a doctrine. There are 4 places in hell. The first itself is Hades hell. The place where Adolf Hitler, he went straight to hell. He is suffering, and he is receiving the just punishment of the evil deeds of his life. He has rejected God, rejected salvation, and when the God comes the second time for the judging of the quick and the dead, he will be judged guilty and tossed into the lake of fire and destroyed. But right now, he is roasting in hell. Room 1. Room 2 is where most people go. It's called purgatory. Purgatory was the Atlanta airport of hell. To get to your final destination, you had to stop at the Atlanta airport and change planes. For some people, that's a quick turnaround. For others, they're stuck there for thousands of years. Purgatory was the place where, during your life, Catholic theology taught, you build up a treasury in heaven. All of the good deeds that you've done in this life were accounted to you as a treasury of merit in heaven. Now, you cannot save yourself. You cannot buy your way out, but you can certainly earn enough points to shorten the amount of time you spend in purgatory. Purgatory was where you were purged of the remaining sinfulness and brokenness of your life before you went to room number 3, which was paradise. Now, the church also taught that you could be nudged out of purgatory by the prayers of the living. I was a student and later a chaplain at a college in England that was founded 1,000 years ago by a man named Thomas de Merton, who gave money so that 10 clerks, priests, could pray in perpetuity for the repose of his soul, so that he would get out of purgatory faster. Now, I don't think anybody has prayed at Merton College for the soul of Thomas de Merton for about 900 years. But it was a common medieval thing to set up what were called chantries, or colleges, to pay priests to basically every day say a mass for the soul of an individual. And you would say this mass and you would pray for the dead, so that in essence you were nagging God, or asking the Virgin Mary to talk to Sonny to make sure you got what you wanted, which was somebody's time in purgatory shortened. Room number 3 was limbo. Yes, it's a Harry Belafonte song. But limbo was the place where babies who died before they were baptized went. You could not condemn a baby could not send it to purgatory because there was nothing for it to be purged of. Therefore, but you couldn't send it to paradise because it was not a baptized, professing Christian. So what do? You send it to limbo. The early church also said there are, besides unbaptized babies, murdered innocents, there's another category, virtuous pagans. What about the people in deepest, darkest Africa, or China, or India, or Lake City, who have never heard the word of God? Should they be condemned? No, that's not fair. Our God is a God of love and justice. But they're not Christians, so they can't go to paradise, and they don't know enough to be purged, so we got to send them to limbo. So the medieval church taught that not only were babies in limbo, but old Greek philosophers, which must have been really miserable for them to have all these babies crying. The fourth place was paradise. It's where Lazarus went. It's where the Virgin Mary is, and where the saints went. For those who were, when they died, were at peace and at one with God, they went straight to paradise. And at the last judgment of God, they would be received into glory and eternity. Now, this was the doctrine of the church for over 1,500 years. And then the Reformation came about. And the Reformation said, this is all nice and good, it makes logical sense, but it's not in the Bible. Where is limbo in the Bible? Where's purgatory in the Bible? Jesus says to Dismas, the good thief, the man who is right when he is crucified. You've got the bad thief who's mocking him, saying, God, save us now. And you have Dismas say, pray for me, Lord, a sinner. And Jesus turns to Dismas, and the gospel says, this day you will be with me in paradise. Now, if anybody deserved to go to purgatory, it would be the good thief, wouldn't it? He repented at the end, therefore he's not going to go to hell. But he has a whole life of crime and violence to atone for. He has nothing in the treasury of merit. His bank account is overdrawn. How can you possibly put him into a place called purgatory when Christ says he's in paradise with him now? So the Reformation fathers, the Protestant tradition, said there are only two places, hell and paradise, or heaven. Hell and until Christ comes again, the final judgment. Now, who goes where and what? The church has struggled over this, but we need to put what the Bible says. Now, and I wrote this out to make sure I didn't mess it up. No one will be condemned to hell because he knew nothing of Christ. Now, this is not George or some namby-pamby liberal 21st century theologian saying this. This is the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 32, shows that the heathen, all the nations, will be judged by the extent to which they followed the light that was given them. What does this mean? It means a good Muslim is in heaven. It means a person who lives their faith according to the life that God gave them, they will be saved. Now, if they knew Jesus Christ, there's no question about it. But they're judged upon the individual efforts and merit of their lives. Vatican II came up with the phrase of unknown Christians, or Christians only known but to God. There's a series of children's novels called the Chronicles of Narnia, written by one of the greatest Anglican or Episcopal writers of the 20th century, C.S. Lewis. And Lewis has his final book is called The Last Battle. And in the last battle, you have the trumpet sounds, the dead are raised, and everybody is judged. Well, the bad guys in this book are the Calamarans. They look and sound and dress and act like Muslim Arabs, but they're not called Muslim Arabs. They worship Tash, who is an evil god who requires sacrifices. And the priests of Tash are brought before Aslan, who's the figure that stands for Jesus Christ. And the priests of Tash think that they are all going to be condemned to death, but Aslan sends some of them to paradise. Why? because they did right as their lights told them to, as their internal compass did. So when I say that people who never knew Jesus Christ, our forefathers who lived on the plains and the prairies and the forests and the fields, who knew nothing of God, who knew nothing of Jesus, who painted themselves blue and ran around half naked in the woods, if they lived lives of moral uprightness and goodness, they would be judged upon that and not immediately condemned to death. Does God condemn anyone to hell? Does God damn people? No, he doesn't. God has not damned a single person. Guess who damns people? You do. I do. We do. We choose hell. No one goes to hell because they're predestined to go to hell. Nobody goes to hell out of an accident. You choose the course that your life takes. I'm fairly confident to say that Adolf Hitler is in hell, Hades hell, and that when the second coming comes, when God judges the quick and the dead, he will be tossed in the lake of fire. Why do I say that? Because he rejected the Christian faith, he propounded the murders of 5 million people, and at the last, he shot himself in the head. He didn't at the last moment say, I'm sorry. He made a choice, and that choice was to reject God. Anyone ever hear of a man named Hans Frank? Hans Frank was Hitler's justice minister from 1933 to 1939. Hans Frank, in November of 1939, was appointed Governor General of Poland. What was happening in Poland in 1939? The Nazis overran the West and the Russians overran the East. And they divided up the country amongst themselves. And Hans Frank was Governor General of Poland, based in Warsaw for 4 years. And he was responsible for a little thing called the Holocaust in Poland. He put into action the words from Berlin to kill the Jews, to kill the intelligentsia, to kill the communists, to kill the priests, to kill, destroy. And when the war was over, Hans Frank was captured. He was tried for his life, and he was found guilty. But before his execution, as he was appealing his sentence, he converted to Christianity. And Hans Frank was hung by the Poles. But Hans Frank is in paradise. Now why do I say that? Well, if he's Catholic, he would be in purgatory on his way to paradise. But if he were Protestant, he'd be in paradise. Why do I say that? Because he repented and acknowledged his brokenness and asked Christ for forgiveness. There was a big stink in the newspapers. I have friends who live all around the world. Internet's a fun thing. It's a terrible thing, but it's also a fun thing because you hear word and stories and news all around the world. And there was a little flurry of indignation in England recently. There's a woman in prison serving a life sentence for murder. Myra Hindley. She and her husband were the war's murderers. In the 1960s, they murdered, like a dozen young girls. And they were sadistic murderers. And they also looked creepy, too, when they published the photos. And Myra Hindley, her cellmates, telling people that Myra has become a Christian and is confident that though she will die in prison, when she goes to die, she will be in paradise with our Lord. And the press is basically all worked up. How could this the most evil woman in Britain, be confident that she's going to hell? She deserves eternal damnation and punishment. Oh yeah, she does, doesn't she? But when you come to think about it, just about all of us deserve eternal punishment and damnation because all of us have fallen short. All of us. We may not be murdering little girls and burying them in the moors. But you know, a sin is a sin is a sin is a sin. Salvation is not like the game of horseshoes. You gotta get close, but you don't need a ringer every time. Do I ever have to obey the law in all of its rigor or suffer the consequences? But if you accept Jesus Christ, that penalty for your your sin is wiped away. Those who are in hell, and hell is real, are those who choose to go to hell. You don't go there by accident. You don't go there by ignorance. You go there because you choose evil in this life. Now, is hell a place of everlasting pain and torment and torture? It doesn't say that in the Bible. It uses a lot of symbolic language, but as we know, it doesn't matter if you set an angel on fire, it's pure spirit, it's already fire. What is the pain and torment of hell? It's eternal separation from God. Thomas Aquinas, one of the great medieval theologians, wrote about one of the joys of heaven was to be able to look down on hell and see the people suffering. Well, he might have had one or two people in mind, but for me, that's no joy. And it's not in the Bible. But the suffering that people have in hell is not an external suffering. It's not a devil poking you in the behind. It's not torture. It's internal. It's the realization that you have made the choice of where you are today. In his novel, The Great Divorce, coming back to C.S. Lewis again, C.S. Lewis talks about hell. And Lewis was one of the great scholars of English and European literature. So he had read Dante, he had read Goethe, he had read Milton. See, he knew he had all the stereophonic screaming and devils and all this and that. And how does he describe hell? It's a rainy Sunday afternoon in an English provincial town when all the shops and bars are closed and you don't go. That doesn't strike me as, pretty damning places, but where was Lewis going with all that? Utter and complete isolation. From all the joys of this life, from all the gifts God has given us, from all the joy and power and majesty all of Him, of God, of our fellow believers, of the community of saints, of the gifts that we have been given in this glorious life. All of that is gone, and you're in a waiting room on a rainy Sunday afternoon, and the snack bar is down, and the newspaper kiosk is empty, and there's no one else there. And all eternity, that's where you are. For Lewis, the pain of hell is that internal loneliness and despair to know that this is it. You are never again going to see those whom you love and knew. You are never going to again be in the presence of God. And again, who is in hell? Those who choose Him. Some of us who we know as Christians, there are two phrases. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, or as Dante said, oh, the skulls of bishops. I sort of like that. A lot of bishops in hell. In other words, the public image that we get the world, oh, we're so holy. We're so, butter won't melt in our mouth. There are people like that in hell because they do not love the Lord. They do not know the Lord. They have so set themselves up as their own little gods, their own little Hitlers. They may not have murdered 5 million people. But Adolf Hitler never pulled the trigger. But they denied Christ in their hearts. May have been speaking about the mouth of Christ. They denied Him in their hearts. And their end is hell. Friends, I don't talk about this every Sunday. I don't do fire and brimstone. I don't. Well, John, maybe we should talk privately about hell. But I don't really beat people up on this point, but it is important to know that hell is real. When we die, we will go to hell. Whether it's the waiting room, if you're a Catholic, whether it's purgatory, no babies in this room, so none of us are going to be in limbo, purgatory, paradise, or Hades. Or if we're Protestants, paradise or Hades. When we die, we're all going to go there. Now, as an aside, what do you think Episcopalian Church teaches on this point? Do we teach purgatory and stuff? or do we teach the Protestant side? Guess what we teach? Both! Isn't that great? You can believe either one. And the Apostles' Creed, we'll say it after this sermon, in Latin, has the phrase ad infernus. Jesus descended ad infernos, to the fiery regions, to the hell, to the pit. So how do we translate into English? He is descended to the dead. Why do we say that? So as not to take a side, not to take a point. But you know, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if there are 2 rooms in hell or 4 rooms in hell. Because what matters is that second coming of Christ, when we will all be judged finally. And here, there is no division among Christian theologians, Christian churches. This is what the Baptists believe, it's what the Orthodox believe, and even some Episcopal bishops believe this. Most of them are screwy. And that is that when Christ comes, you will be judged. You will be judged on your life. You will be judged whether you have kept all the law. And if you have fallen short, you're destined for annihilation. There's one out. Have you trusted in Jesus Christ? Doesn't mean are you perfect in Christ? Have you done everything right? Have you turned in your pledge card on time? Well, for this church, yes. It doesn't mean anything of that, but do you love and trust Jesus and put him first? And then all the penalty, you're still guilty, but the penalty is wiped away. You are welcome to paradise with God forever. There are 2 places eventually you're going to wind up, one of 2 places. And you have the choice where you're going to go. Heaven or hell. Paradise or Hades. Into the pit, where the worm never dies and the fires are unquenchable. Or into the paradise and bliss and joy with God. And the choice is yours. But there is a catch. We ask, the Bible asks, Jesus asks, believe in me. Believe in the Lord God. Believe in his Son, Jesus Christ. And salvation comes to you through your faith in him. Amen. Friends, would you please stand and join with me in saying the Nicene Creed?